Good evening, everybody. Today is the 4th of June, as according to the old calendar. We have 5 saints today. I am, of course, Rita Laza. Welcome to Voices of British Orthodoxy. First saint of the day is Saint Briaca, Breaker. And she is from the 5th or 6th century. I'll read her entry in the book, then I'll read the entry in the group chat, as I will do for each of the saints featured today. So let's get right into it. The limited amount of information extant on Saint Briaca is pious legend based upon a now lost medieval hagiography. It appears she was a native of Ireland and probably a disciple of either or both Saint Brigid, who we commemorate on the 1st of February, or Petroc, who we commemorated back on the 17th of March. She crossed over to Cornwall with several companions and lived in solitude and great sanctity. Several of the group are said to have been martyred by the local ruler Tudor or Theodoric. Saint Braca reposed circa late 5th or early 6th century AD. 5th to 6th century, Saint Braca was a disciple of Saint Patrick and Saint Brigid. Not too much is known of Braca. Again, forgive me if I've butchered the pronunciation. She is said to have migrated with several companions from Ireland to Cornwall in 460, where she landed at Raver on the eastern bank of the River Hale in the 100th of Penrith. There she led a solitary life in great sanctity and was honoured with a famous church for pilgrimages and miracles. Montague claims martyrdom for this saint. The next entry is for Saint Boriana, and she is also from the 6th century. Saint Boriana was one of many Irish saints who migrated to Cornwall to spread the gospel. And is the case with many of her contemporaries. Little in the way of reliable information on her life is still extant. She is said to have lived as an anchoress at the place now known as Saint Burian near Penzance during the 6th century. Sixth century, Saint Buriana was another Irish woman who migrated to Cornwall, where the village of Saint Burian perpetuates her name. King Athelstan built a college and church there to house her relics. Right, okay, it appears our next entry is actually unique to the book. Crichton, Meaden, and Deegan, 6th century. These saints were disciples of Saint Petroc at his monastery in Bodmin in Cornwall. Nothing else is known of their lives. I'm gonna read the entry that's only in the group chat now because our final 2 entries have longer entries, so I guess as a 6th saint of the day, Saint Nennoch of the tribe of Saint Brychan of Brecknock, abbess in Brittany, also known as Nenooc, Nenocha, Nenocha, Ninoch, Ninocha, or Gwen Gussel. Died 467. Saint Nennoch is said to have been a daughter of the prolific Saint Brychan of Brecknock. After serving God in her native Britain, she is said to have followed Saint Germanus of Auxerre into France, where she became an abbess of one or more monasteries in Armoritza or Armorica. Many miracles are ascribed to her in her legend in the monastery of the Cross of Quimperle in the Diocese of Quimper and Brittany. Our next entry is for Eadfrith, also known as Eadfrid, and she is from the 8th century. I think in the book it's a proper entry, but underneath the in the group chat it says the translation of the relics. Anyway, in the book it says Eadfrith, Eadfrid, 8th century. Saint Eadfrith succeeded Saint Edbert, who we commemorated back on the 6th of May, as 8th Bishop of Lindisfarne, and is generally believed to have been the scribe and artist responsible for the Lindisfarne Gospels. He reposed in AD 721. So today we are celebrating Saint Edfrith's translation of the relics. Translation of the relics of Saint Edfrith of Lindisfarne, monk and bishop, also known as Eadfrith. Died 721. Edfrith's life is obscure prior to his becoming a bishop in 698. He studied in Ireland and was well trained as a scribe, an artist, and a calligrapher, before it seems almost certain that he alone wrote and illuminated the Lindisfarne Gospels, which can now be seen in the British Library. His masterpiece was dedicated to St. Cuthbert, and would have taken at least 2 years to complete. He welcomed the new text of the Gospels and the new layout, both of which came to him from Italy via Wearmouth Jarrow. He provided evangelist portraits as a creative artist in the field of Mediterranean expertise. He also excelled in insular magical script and Irish geometric and zoomorphic decoration of extraordinary delicacy and accuracy. The fusion of these elements in one work is a tribute to Edfrith's well-rounded education, and the merging of Roman and Irish elements in Northumbria about 35 years after the Synod of Whitby. The manuscript would have been enough to ensure Eadfrith a place in art history. Nevertheless, he was also a good bishop. Most of his memorable actions, however, are associated with St. Cuthbert. The anonymous life of Cuthbert was dedicated to Eadfrith, and he commissioned St. Bede to write his prose life of Cuthbert. He restored Cuthbert's oratory on the Inner Farne Island for the use of St. Felgild. He may also have been the recipient of the letter from St. Aldhelm. Eadfrith was connected with Cuthbert even in death. He was buried near his tomb. His relics, together with those of Saints Aidan, Eadbert, and Ethelwald, were taken with Cuthbert's in their wanderings throughout Northumbria from 875 to 995, when they reached Durham. When Cuthbert's relics were taken to the new cathedral, Eadfrith's were translated too. Today is the feast of that translation. And our final entry is for St. Petroc, who you can see on your screen right now. This is St. Petroc. St. Petroc, also known as Petroc, Pedrog, or Peru. Perreux. He's from the 6th century as well. St. Petroc has been called the Captain of Cornish Saints by Anglican historian Thomas Fuller, and is one of Britain's most illustrious saints. A native of Wales, he went to Ireland, where he is believed to have studied under St. Kevin, 3rd of June. St. Petroc then went to Cornwall, where he founded a monastery at the place now known as Padstow, Petrocster, and a second one at Bodmin. He reposed there circa AD 594. Later, some of his relics were translated to Brittany, where he is known as Saint Perreux. The final group of letters, Perreux. It seems he also has a Troparion, which I'll read for you after I've read the entry in the group chat. St. Petroc of Cornwall Abbot, and then it has the same 3 names. Died at Troparion, Wales, c. 594. Cornwall's most famous saint was the son of a prince from southern Wales. Petroc studied theology in Ireland. He settled at Hellsmouth in Cornwall, had an active apostolate, and founded a monastery at Llanwefnoch, later called Petrocston, now Padstow. After 30 years there, Petroc made a pilgrimage to Rome and Jerusalem, at which he is also reputed to have reached the Indian Ocean and lived for a time on an island as a hermit. Returning to Cornwall, he founded another monastery at Little Petroc, Nansfenton, with a mill and a chapel, and a hermitage at Bodmin, where St. Goran met him. After meeting the hermit, Petroc travelled south. He built a cell for himself by the river and a monastery on the hilltop for his 12 disciples, among which were Saints Croydon, Meaden, and Deegan. Like several other hermit saints, Petroc had a special affinity with wild animals. Petroc was buried at Padstow, which became the centre of his cultus. There are 18 churches dedicated to him in Devon, plus others in Cornwall and South Wales. About 1,000, his shrine and relics, including his staff and belt, were translated to Bodmin. In 1178, his relics were stolen by a disgruntled priest named Martin, and given to St. Mien's Abbey near Rains in Brittany. But they were returned to Bodmin the next year at the request of its prior Roger, after the intervention of Bishop Bartholomew of Exeter and King Henry II. A rib was left at St. Mien's. During the reign of Henry VIII, his shrine and tomb in the Church of Bodmin on the eastern side of the high altar were in the Church of Bodmin on the high altar. During the Reformation, the fine Sicilian Islamic reliquary containing Petroc's head was hidden. It was rediscovered in the 19th century and remains in a parish church at Bodmin. Petroc may also have evangelized in Brittany, where more than 30 churches are dedicated to him under the, I guess you could say the more French name, Peru. And here is his Troparion for him and his companions. Troparion of St. Petroc and his companions, Tone 2. O Petroc, master builder of the faith in the West, who didst prefer the heavenly warfare to thy kingly heritage and military prowess, with thy companions thou didst travel through the West country, establishing churches, and didst include the animals in thy loving care. Wait, I've actually lost myself. I will start from the beginning. Forgive me. Troparion of St. Petroc and his companions, Tone 2. O Petroc, master builder of the faith in the West, who didst prefer the heavenly warfare to thy kingly heritage and military prowess. With thy companions thou didst travel through the West country establishing churches, and didst include the animals in thy loving care. In thy monastic zeal thou didst recite psalms in rivers. Through thy prayer may the flow of Christian faith ever increase in our land. I will leave that in the description for any of you that want to chant that. May those saints intercede for us before the righteous judge. Friendly reminder that I believe it's 2 weeks Saturday, right? Yes. 2 weeks this Saturday is the celebration of British saints. In matter of fact, I might include, especially for days where we might not have icons, I might actually, as a build-up, in order to help promote it, I might also, have, like, the proper, the promotion poster images in these videos when we're reading saints, particularly for the ones that we don't necessarily have proper icons of. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you've had a wonderful day. God bless you all, and amen.